Hello everyone and a very warm welcome to this Azure Function tutorial series. If you are wanting to be a Power Platform developer or an architect, this is a session for you. In this session, we will explore Azure Functions that can help you overcome the Power Platform limitations. We will together learn, create advanced integrations. So what's the agenda for today? So first and foremost, we will understand what are Azure Functions. We will learn about the various trigger events. We'll see how Azure Functions can be written in different programming languages. We'll also see how you can extend the Azure Function with AI. And then we will see how Azure Function integration works well in the Azure ecosystem. And we will use API Management and Analytics to show that. So that being said, what is Azure Function? The Azure Function is a serverless compute system. That means you don't have to set up your infrastructure or a server to run an Azure Functions. The most important thing about Azure Function, you can run small pieces of your own code. So you don't have to be a programmer. In the era of ChatGPT, you can simply give it a prompt to ChatGPT and it can create the Azure Function code for you. But that being said, you still need to know the basics, right? And that is the reason why we are doing this session. That being said, the Azure Functions can be triggered with various events. The main event as an Power Platform developer would be the HTTP request. And the second one would be the timer-based request. The others are good, but they might not be important to us, such as service bus queues, event grid, or changes to your data. As I told you, it can support multiple programming languages. So if you know basics of JavaScript, choose JavaScript. If you know .NET, choose .NET. If you're coming from a background such as an administrator, select PowerShell. If you're a front-end developer, choose TypeScript. One important aspect out here, the Azure Function is built for scaling. It can scale automatically from 0 to thousands of instances based on the traffic. So let's say that if you're creating a custom connector and if you think that what happens when multiple people or there's a bulk job that's going to happen, will Azure Function work? The answer is yes, because it is made to scale. That being said, I told you about integration. The main integration that we are going to look at is not storage, not service bus, but we'll look at API management, which will help us expose a Swagger and also put some restrictions on the functions. And we'll look at analytics because you need to know what is happening with your Azure Function, or is it being used in your company. That being said, that's all the slides that I have. So let's go and start the demo. So here, my friends, I have a folder. It's known as Power Platform Developer. And what I'm going to do is I already have Visual Studio Code installed. If you want to use Visual Studio, you can use that. But I had demand that I should use Visual Studio Code to go ahead and do this. Perfect. So I have opened Visual Studio Code, and what I need to do is, let me close off the terminal. And what I need to do is, first and foremost, I need to tell you the prerequisites, right? The first prerequisite is to have Visual Studio Code. You have taken that into consideration. The second one is to have an Azure subscription because you need to deploy the function somewhere. Third, you need to have a Power Platform environment. Now then, you need to have .NET installed on your computer. I have installed .NET 8 because that's the latest version. And then you need to have few extensions installed. So you'll see the extensions out here. Type in C#. And you need to install the C# extension. I already have it installed, or else it would have told me to install it. For example, I don't have this extension installed, so it gives me install. I have it installed. And then you need to install the Azure Functions extension. Again, I have it installed, so I don't need to go ahead and install it. That being said, what I have done is that I have also logged into my subscription. So I have signed in with my Azure subscription. If you have not signed in, you can sign in and add an account out here. Once you sign in, you will have your account and your resources listed out here. This is my Azure tenant, and I see that I have got one Azure function out here. Now that's all good and it looks nice. So next I need to go ahead and create the Azure function. How will I create it? I'll click on F1 and I'll type in Azure function and I'll create a new project. I'll use this as the folder in which the project will be developed. I will use C#, but if you see, you can go ahead and use PowerShell. You can use JavaScript, TypeScript. Let's go ahead and use C#. I have .NET 8, the latest version. And here it tells me what template I need to go ahead and I'll go ahead and use the HTTP trigger. Now that I have used the HTTP trigger, it tells me to give it a meaningful name. I'm going to say HTTP example and I'll give my function a name as well. So I'll say HTTP function. I'll give it anonymous as of now. You can give it function. Function means it will generate an API key for you. But for testing, I prefer anonymous and then we can change it later. Now what really happens, Visual Studio Code is smart and it creates boilerplate code for us. So here we have program.cs. So this is a code that bootstraps the Azure function using the worker SDK. Now we don't need to understand the worker SDK. And what it does, it goes ahead and so we'll start with program.cs. The program.cs initializes the code and it starts the Azure function. It handles the HTTP request, that is the incoming HTTP request. And it optionally goes ahead and helps you with Azure Insights. We are going to go ahead and use Azure Insights, but not as of now. So this is the first file. Then you will have the bin and the obj. You know, once you build the project, you'll have the bin and the obj project. So then you have the host JSON. The host JSON is a file used by the Azure function to define the runtime settings. In this case, we just have application insights, which we are not going to use as of now. Then here is where the real magic happens, right? This is the HTTP example file. So what does this file do? This file is the actual Azure function that we go ahead and use. If you look at this, this is our function name. It tells us the authorization is anonymous. You can have get and post, and then you have an HTTP request out here, which is REQ, right? And it returns an OK result function. If everything is okay, then just go ahead and return this. Now, this all looks good, but let's make this a little bit interesting, right? When I say a little bit interesting, let's create something a little bit different so that we can understand the code. Now, what I'm going to do is, let's take an example. The example would be, we want to go ahead and input it a number and we want to reverse it, right? We want to input a number and then we want to reverse it. How can we go ahead and achieve that? So first and foremost, I need to go ahead and input a number. So to input a number, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a private class and I'm going to set up getters and setters out here. Okay, perfect, right? So I have used the request data as the input. I can say a class and then I have set it as a type of integer and I named it number. Now that I have the number, next what I want to do is I want to also return back the number, right? I want to return back the reverse number. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and create another private class and give it getters and setters, such as it can return me a number. So I have created an input and an output. Now that I have created an input and an output, I need to go ahead and create a method which can reverse the number. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a private method which can reverse a number, right? I say that, and it will need an integer, right? It should return a value. And that is the reason why it's giving me an error. So what I'll say, I'll start with this return and I'll just say maybe return result for now. Okay. And I'm going to initialize the result inside the method. And then what I'm going to do, if you see IntelliSense is my friend, or you can say ChatGPT is my friend, and it already told me, and it already gave me the code to reverse the number. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and see if the number is negative. And here it will go ahead and convert the number into a non-negative number. Now that I have done that, the next step would be to go ahead and return the result, right? If you see, I should return the result. I think that's pretty much it. I'll return the result out here. But now you understand the basics. So an input number, a number we go ahead and return out here, the reversed number, and then the method that goes ahead and actually reverses the number. Now that we have that all set up, the next thing what I need to do is configure my Azure function. The name of my function is HTTP example. That's fine. We should have named it better, but I don't want to get, I want to post a request. I want to go ahead and return a number and catch block. Okay. Now that I have put in a try and a catch block, I'm going to go ahead and first try to get my request body. Right? I'm going to get my request body. Next, okay, IntelliSense or Copilot is helping me. So I can just say, get the request body and read the request body. Okay, read the request body. Now that it has read the request body, what I need to do is I want to make sure that the data is in here and it is JSON serialized. Now here I'm going ahead and getting some errors. So I think I need to go ahead and use a using statement. So I will say system.text.json. So that gets the error resolved, because if you see, it was of a class system.text.json. So that's what I need. Now that the JSON has been deserialized and stored in the data, I'll make sure that the data is not null. If you want to do some error handling, this is what you go ahead and return. You return a new bad request object saying the value is invalid. Okay. So this is important. We know that it returns an OK object, but if you see, you can also return a bad result. That's good. Now that that's done, let's go ahead and initialize a variable out here, and we'll pass it the function method that we created. That's what we want to do. Now we want to go ahead and return a response. So we want to return a reversed number. So I'll say response and return the reverse number like this. And then I will return the OK response out here. Okay, so just return the OK response out here, and I don't need this OK response. So that's good. If there is an exception, go ahead and return an exception. So if you see, we initiated the logger was here. So iLogger. So we will go ahead and log the error. And to log the error, we can use this and the exception. Right? The iLogger is used. And this is our Azure function. So you have created an Azure function that reverses a number. Yeah, you'll say, Clavin, maybe I could do it in Power Platform, but this is not about doing it in Power Platform. This is about you trying to understand Azure function and you trying to go ahead and create solutions for your citizen developers, because you're an architect or a Power Platform developer. Right? I will save the file. It should be auto saved anyways. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit F5 on my keyboard. So if you see, my build has started and it's trying to build it. So our project has been built successfully and it returns me an endpoint. What do I do with this endpoint? To use this endpoint, I need to go ahead and use a tools such as a Postman or ARC. If you are not aware of Postman, just Google it. It is a world's leading API platform, and it can help you go ahead and test your Azure functions locally. So I already have Postman installed, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this out here and paste it in Postman. And here I'm going to pass it the number in the body, and I'm going to click on send. And here it gave me an error because I have got HTTP and HTTP. Bad thing. I should hit send again. And here it tells me it's an invalid input. If I go back to my code in Visual Studio, and let's try to add, now I know where the error comes. The error comes here, right? So I can add a breakpoint to troubleshoot this. I can now go back to my Postman. If you see, it's stuck. It's not returned me an error. But here, if you see, if I can go down, and here request body is coming in as null. So request body required number. So first thing, I'll make this iResult into a task. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to, I don't need this code, so let's get rid of this code. And what I'm going to do, understand this, every time you use the code from ChatGPT, it might not be good. Okay, this is a prime example of doing this. So Copilot can sometimes take you for a spin. So I'll say, okay, string request body, and then I'm going to read the request body like this. Okay, now let's go ahead and put in the breakpoint, put it on try, and let's try to save it. Let's try to run it again. Perfect. So this is now running. I'll open my Postman and hit on send. This should hit my breakpoint, so that's good. And this time the request body is there. If you see, is there. Okay, that's a success. So that's good. It went into my reverse method. I can line by line debug it locally. It will do this as many times as the numbers are. And if you see on the right, it tells me it's getting the local variables. And I think that should be 1, and that should get out of it. Now, if things are correctly, it should go to the OK object. That's very good. The variables are here. And it should return the OK object. Let's see what happened. And it returned me the reverse number. So here, my friends, you have created an Azure function. You saw how Copilot can make your life difficult at times. Understand that user sync. Don't just follow Copilot. You saw it live. You saw me troubleshoot. You saw me struggle. And I think that's pretty much it. In the next tutorial, we'll see how you can deploy this Azure function into your Azure environment. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.